Welcome. Today we're going to be looking at bread. Specifically three types, starting some that comes from a bread maker, which requires very little effort. One that is a sourdough in the middle, if you can move your hand over, thank you. So the sourdough, which is actually very simple but does take a very long time. And finally, a standard bread mix, which you can buy from any kind of supermarket, which just has all the ingredients pre-mixed and you just add some water to it. So let's start making them and find out which one we prefer. So we'll go back to last night, and look at that, I'm wearing my pyjamas under the apron. So the first thing we're going to do is make together the dough for the sourdough, because you have to do that in advance and give it a long time to proof. This is a nice easy no-knead sourdough, so we'll start with 410 grams of a nice strong white bread flour, and then we'll mix that in with 2 tablespoons of a fast action or instant yeast, and I had to go get a second packet, but we'll just skip that. We mix that in with 1 tablespoon of salt as well. Maybe it's meant to be a teaspoon, I don't know, but at least it keeps them balanced. And finally we mix that with about 335, which is about 1 1/3 cups of warm, not hot, not cold water. If it's too cold, the yeast will take ages to warm up, so just warm it up for a little bit in the microwave until it gets to body temperature. And that's all we do. Mix all together with the spoon you keep in your pocket. So just give it a good mix, round and round and round together until it starts looking like a dough, which can take a long time. The goal here is just to keep beating at it with a spoon, scraping down the edges every so often as well, and until you stop seeing flour as much over all of the bowl. You're not trying to knead it within an inch of its life at this stage. We're just looking to combine it, and we'll let the dough do its own work and knead itself overnight, because as we said, this is a no-knead dough, so don't be killing yourself over this. So it should look something like this, kind of blurry and out of focus once you're done, and all you need to do then is wrap it up with a plastic wrap you keep in your pocket at all times. And that's the most annoying part, is that you do have to start the night before. It says you can leave it for 18 hours, but if you do it in the morning, it's not going to be ready overnight. So make it the night before, and that's all you got to do. So I'll see you in the morning for part 2. We'll just put our apron in the back of the door here, and see you then. And look at that, all the dishes have been done. Managed to put on some semi-proper clothes, only a mildly stained t-shirt at this point. But look at this. By leaving it overnight and giving it a good chance to rise, we've got a fantastic dough that's nearly escaping the bowl at this point. So I think we need to get stuck in and get started with part 2. So to cook this, we're going to need a Dutch oven. Something like this, cast iron, really strong, and can build up a lot of heat when you put it in the oven. So get it in the oven before you start anything else and give it a good chance to warm up, because the oven needs to be at least 230 degrees Celsius. As for the dough, we're going to at least give it a little bit of a beat down and a reshaping so that we can get a chance to get it into a shape that's more usable for us. And yes, it does smell fantastic. And as you can see, I gave the counter a good cleaning, so time to dirty it again. Just cover the counter with some extra bread flour, just so the dough doesn't stick to it while you're trying to work and reshape it, because we are going to try and develop a little extra gluten here by beating it down and folding it as much as we can. As for scraping it out the bowl, just use your hand. I mean, if you have a dough scraper, just use it, but your hand is kind of shaped like a dough scraper, and as long as you put some flour on your fingertips as well, you'll find it very easy to pull out. So we'll do a little bit of speeding up here while Greg just continuously folds and reshapes this. And you can see I'm just slapping it down on the counter as hard as I can and folding it. I'm not quite getting the stretch that I'm after, because I'm still trying to master this technique. If you want to watch someone that does it a lot better than me, probably Joshua Weissman's the best person to see about this, but as for me, I'm still learning, and you can see I'm just wrestling with it here and trying to get it into a workable shape. There are more delicate techniques out there in the marketplace, but I was just going for a basic ball shape for it to give it a chance to rise again in the proving dish. So just once you've got it ready, pull up it in the proving dish, cover it with some oiled plastic wrap in case it rises really quickly. But after 30-40 minutes or so, your oven will have preheated and your dough should have re-risen. So all we're going to look to do here is not burn yourself on this dish, and be very careful you don't damage your countertops either. But all we're going to look to do is get the dish ready for the dough by sprinkling in just a little bit of extra flour so it doesn't stick. It's very unlikely to stick, but it also just adds a nice decorative effect to the base of the bread and everything as well. And get the dough from your proving dish or bowl or whatever you were using and plop it into the Dutch oven like that. Mine unfortunately lost a little bit of its shape, but as you'll see very soon, it is a very forgiving dough and that doesn't matter too much. So directions are 30 minutes with the lid on, 15 minutes with the lid off, or you can leave it longer. Oh, I'm very happy with that. If you want it to go a darker colour. I like mine this kind of light blonde colour, so I tend not to cook it for too long, beyond 45 minutes. I'm very happy with this one, because I keep tapping it, and then there was this long piece of footage of me staring at it. But we should move on to the next recipe, for which we're making bread with a bread maker. Now this bread maker I've had for a couple of years. It was a Christmas present a couple of years ago, and I've been using it for a long time. It is very nice. It does produce some very tasty bread when following the recipes in the booklet. But there is a downside, and it's this little thing here, and it's this stirrer, because after you've baked the bread, that gets stuck inside of it. But not much we can do. As for the recipe here, it was following much the same from the others, but with a few extra ingredients. I could give you the recipe for this, but considering you don't have this exact bread maker, it might not be very useful to you. It's a standard mixture of water and oil in the bottom. It's a certain mixture of bread flour, which I was trying to calculate in the scale, and I ended up losing track of it, so let's hear what I had to say about that. 203 and 375 is going to be 578. I checked if the calculator is correct. And that's the oven in the background, that's how noisy it is. So as you can see, we're already about to finish off the flour here. We're also going to add in some salt. I think this one's a teaspoon based on the colour of the spoon I'm using. That's going to be combined with the same measure of yeast and a tablespoon, a very large tablespoon of granulated sugar. And there's not much to it. It just goes inside the bread machine at this point, and the whole program takes 4 hours to cook. So you might want to do something to pass the time, like, I don't know, some dancing or something. Like, you can see me fighting it at this point, but eventually I just give in to the rhythm. That's how I dance in nightclubs as well. Now, our final one of the day is just a standard Wright's premium white bread mixture, which comes pre-mixed in the bag, and the only thing we need to add is water. So all we're going to do is dump this into the scale here, and like I've been doing the rest of the time, I'm using the scale to measure my water so that it's nice and precise. Although you have to be really careful, because sometimes there's a bit of lag of it adding up. I ended up putting a little too much in the sourdough and had to fix it, so you can see I'm being very cautious with this one. And I'm deciding to use the stand mixer for this one. I had this stand mixer for a number of years. Mostly I've used it for using cakes in the past, but in this case we'll use it for the bread mixture, which quickly I regret, because this starts happening. I don't want the machine to break by bread dough getting stuck up into the holes where the tools go, so I quickly changed my plan, got rid of the stand mixer and decided to do just a little bit by hand, and then I realised I needed flour and my hands were filthy, so that got it over to this counter, but I needed my better half to come in and to sprinkle it on the counter for me while I held my hands there like a little dinosaur who bakes bread, just holding them there like a little T-Rex. So she was very kind to stop what she was doing and come in and help me out here. And we'll speed this up because I did spend a long time kneading this one until it was fully combined. My goal was to get it until a point where it stopped sticking to my hand. I kind of wish I'd just done it in a bowl to begin with, but I think I was just trying to be visual for YouTube and decided to do it on the board. In the end, it managed to stop sticking to me. I just had to keep kneading it for a while. As you can, this was sped up by 700%, so I was fisting at it for a long time. The recipe asked me to rest it on the board for 5 minutes, which I did. Give it another knead and rest it again, which I did. but don't need to do that in camera. But once you've followed the instructions, this one just asks me to plop it into a bread dish like this. You may recognize this from the banana bread episode I did originally. If you haven't watched that, may as well. But it did give it a final proof in here. So retrieve the plastic wrap you keep in your pocket at all times and just give it a little bit of a cover. Now initially I didn't oil it, but after letting it sit for 5 minutes I noticed it was starting to rise pretty quickly, so I went back and oiled it. Save yourself your hassle and oil it from the beginning. And as you can see, it rises to the top of the dish. And into the overworked oven it goes. The thing's been on all day, but it takes 30 to 40 minutes to have it look like this. And I was a little bit worried it wasn't going to get much taller, but as you can see it did actually rise very substantially towards the end. And as with all bread, you need to let it cool in a wire rack. There's no sense in keeping it in the dish, it will go soggy, but this one had a very satisfying sound, which you'll hear. Satisfying. I was very pleased with how this one turned out for it being a standard bread mix that was available in the store, but it's turned out very nice. Got this nice farmhouse effect on the other side where it continued to rise in the oven. And after a little bit of resting time, the bread from the bread maker is ready as well. So now we can compare all 3 loaves and see them side by side and everything. So let me just get this out of the pan and make sure that can rest on the rack as well. So this one has turned out very blonde. This is how I like it. This is the French bread setting, and there's that annoying hole in the bottom of the bread where the dough hook is still stuck inside. I won't retrieve it until the bread's had a chance to sit for a good chunk of time and cool down, because if you retrieve it too early you just ruin the texture of the bread and it falls apart on the inside. Well, we can't get stuck into the bread maker one. The sourdough was ready hours ago, so let's get stuck into that after. Now, the French bread is going to be kept for at least a day and then cut up and used for French toast. It's not very good for sandwiches because it's very small. The sourdough, we cut that up into long slices and toast it, and typically have it with scrambled eggs or something. And this one turned out to be a very good sandwich bread. We made some basic sandwiches with this one, and it's actually a very nice bread. It kind of outdoes the bread maker one, which is incredible. I didn't think it would be that good, but showed how little I know. As for the sourdough, might as well get stuck into that in camera while we're here, since it's the only one I'm able to cut into. So I'm just navigating my way around this here. If I can just get this knife to work and trust myself with it. What this bread wins on is it's the best tasting bread out of the 3, because it's developed that kind of quick sourdough taste with it and has a very solid crust on it also. As you can see, I'm having to work hard to cut through the base because of how warm the dish was. And for someone like me that doesn't have a sourdough starter and doesn't trust themselves to keep and run a sourdough starter, this is a very nice way of doing it. You still get the nice crummy airy texture in the inside and everything, and it has a fantastic taste. Like, I have to stop myself cutting it up and eating it in full. Now, if I can make these, you can make those. I am not an advanced baker by any stretch. There are better people out there that you can watch if you want to learn that, but thanks for watching the ones that I've made. And take care, and see you next time.